Good morning, family. It's good to see you. Good morning, Autobots of Westover Job Corps. It is I, your intrepid instructor, Mr. Romer, and it is my pleasure to be speaking with you this morning, which is 9:19 a.m. on June the 18th, 2020. I just got notified by my computer that my drive storage is full on my drive at google.com, which means I don't know if I'm going to be able to upload this video. We'll find out. They asked me to put together it. I didn't even realize that this would be an issue. This might be the last video for quite a while until I figure out why my Google Drive is out of space because of these hour-long videos that the Department of Labor has specified. No, they didn't specify an hour-long video, but they specified that there should be proof that a student participates for an hour. And to me, that means if you sit and listen to a whole video of an hour's length, then you have participated. You've listened. You've listened to an instructor talk about the industry and talk about automotive things in general to further your understanding of what it is that we do at Job Corps. One of the interesting things that's coming up in today's meeting, and I don't mind sharing this, is we're supposed to attach how long it takes for an average student. I hate that word, average student. You're all above average. You're all amazing. The fact that it takes others shorter periods of time to grasp a particular topic or to understand a particular concept has nothing to do with whether or not you're average or above average. It's a matter of what's happened in your life and the challenges that we all have in making sure that information gets in. The fact that I'm being asked to quantify this is beyond the pale for me as a person. It's anathema to me. That means it's against my core belief system, my way of viewing the world. It's just corporatism at its best. Happy with you guys. Hoping that everyone's okie dokie during this COVID pandemic. And just to slam home the reality of it, about 2-3 weeks ago, I told you how some ambulances came in the night, or early evening, at night. And I just remember it being darker in ambulances and a cop car. Took a person to the hospital, and later the rumors on the block were that person died from COVID. They took another one from the other side of the block last night. Same. Someone apparently had difficulty breathing. Ambulance showed up. No cop this time, just the ambulance. And a fire truck, emergency response vehicle. Small one, not the big ladder truck or anything. I don't know what fire trucks, what their different types are. I used to, but I don't anymore. So that's the second person on the street that I live that has gone to the hospital due to breathing complications. COVID-19. is here in Springfield, and it is on my street. As of June 17th, Wednesday, on my day off. Well, that's the other thing. I recognized that yesterday's attendance, I didn't click the right button, or I thought I did, and I saved it, and I went back and I checked it, and I go and I check it again, and it's like the computer keeps putting it back in and taking away the one thing. So the computer wants you to use the way that the system seems to be. I have to like do it 3 times for it to finally stick. It wants you to be constantly using your Job Corps email. You can't use an email that's outside of the Citrix system, so you have to log in under your classroom email, your Job Corps email, your student portal, and it doesn't want to take email addresses. It wants you to come through the system, but it doesn't want to acknowledge that I'm asking for emails. If I could show you the process that I have to do in order for attendance to get put in properly, you'd laugh because you'd recognize how broken Google Classroom is. But it's what we've got. And so we make do with what we've got. So I just want to let you guys know that I am thankful that you're watching my videos. I'm hoping you pay attention at the end of this video. I hope, I remember to say a super secret magic code word, which allows you to, in one question, verify that you have indeed watched my video, which means you participated in a thing that I speak about things automotive and you have listened. The reason why I don't have a 20 question questionnaire about the things that I have spoken about is because sometimes these talks bring to you the very first time some of these concepts and ideas, and to immediately give you a quiz concerning the topics that I have spoken about is unfair. It's unfair. I say the secret password as a shorthand for yes, I've watched the video. Now, because we have the requirements set forth by API and MTC, I don't think it's Job Corps, but we'll find out. That you need to participate for X amount of hours during the week, and this is a one pathway. When I speak to you guys on this video about automotive things, and we're getting to it. We have our handy dandy book and our glossary for me to prove that you've been here for an hour listening to me talk is the only thing I require. I don't need you guys to take a quiz at the end to hammer in something I've spoken about, because I know what it's like talking and listening to somebody for an hour. Sometimes you tune out and you're like, but osmotically, you hear me talk about screwdrivers and turbos and wrenches and head gaskets and brake calipers. And although that knowledge is not direct and immediate, as if you were sitting there under a car with that part in your hand, what it does do is it fertilizes your brain for the concepts about them, so that when you return to Job Corps, you can go, oh, this is a brake. This is what Mr. Romer talked about. Oh, didn't make a lot of sense when he was speaking, but now I've got it in my hand. Makes a whole lot of sense now. I know a little bit more about it. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm fertilizing your minds. I'm shoveling compost into your brain cases. Sorry, I'm just recognizing how funny my analogy sounds. And that's that. On to our book of terms. You all know I can't read without them. Oh, there you all are. Well, I can see the reflection of me. Do you see that? That little look into my glasses, and you can see a black square. Right? We'll use this. Right? And inside the black square is a picture of me, because that's what I see on my computer. It's infinite. Which means that if you looked in the glasses, it goes on forever. Anyways. So the last thing I remember reading, the American Petroleum Institute. That was yesterday's. Today's is the American Wire Gauge, AWG, a standard used to identify different wire sizes. American Wire Gauge. So, just as a side note, anything American, American Standards, American Wire, American Petroleum, American Measurements, these are all based on imperial standards. The English system that was originally how things were measured in the 14th through 16th. That's the Industrial Revolution. So I figure let's take it from the 1700s on. So the 16th century to now, the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, 2000s, all the way up into 2020. What we have is a way of measuring things. Hold on one second, I have to answer this. Let me bring this up. Oh, let me bring this up. Good. Where things are measured, pounds, gauges are measured in inverse order. I'll explain in a minute. We have inches. We have ways of measuring things that sometimes don't really make sense. Like the foot and inches. The foot, and inches is something that once referred to a system of measurement which was literally the length of the foot of the King of England. Or maybe it might have been French. I think it's the King of England, if my morning brain is working properly. I'm trying to remember King Edward or somebody. I want to say King Arthur, but that's hilarious. One of the English kings said, length of measurement, 1 of my feet, 1 foot. So that if I put one heel to a toe and then a heel to a toe and a heel to a toe, I can walk off a distance. And the distance from my room, from one wall to the other wall, is 20 of my steps, heel to toe, or 20 of the king's feet, or 20 feet. An inch was the distance between one side of your thumb to the other side of your thumb. That's an inch. That's the measurement. The king's thumb and the king's foot. At a certain point, this length became standardized. And then engineers needed to have finer and finer measurements. And so they split the inch in half and called it half inch. And then a quarter of that was a quarter of that inch. And then a 16th of that was a 16th of it. And so they broke the inch down to its various lengths. They also noticed that 12 of the king's thumbs would equal one of his feet. And we got 12 inches in a foot. Completely arbitrary. And it's the old imperial measurement system that we use to this day in certain aspects in the American measurement system, which is dated and antiquated, which means dated. It started a long time ago. Antiquated means it's really old. And the idea behind me using the words dated and antiquated is that they're out of date. It's old time thinking. And I think old timey style. I'm an old guy. But even I recognize the use of the imperial measurements, the American standards of measurement using these old ways, is completely out of sync. Sorry, I have to move my chair. My legs get compressed. Wait, a little side saddle. There. As opposed to modern systems of measurement, which are based on metric sizes, which are based off of nature, not the human body as a measuring tool. Pounds. Pounds was another one. I think we used to measure. So, old English measurement. They asked, well, how much do you weigh? 2 stone. You measure as much as 2 stones. They used a particular stone to see, and it's a weight, a measurement of an actual rock that you're compared against. Wherein the meter is exactly attributable to things in physics. It's based on the powers of 10 and 100. 1 meter is 1 quintillionth, or I should say 1 nanometer, which is the distance that light can travel at a certain, it's in other words, it's based on the physics. I don't remember the roots of metric system, but I do know that it's based on mathematics. Like a meter is a meter anywhere in the world and anywhere in the universe. We don't have to see. That's another thing. A pound is different if you go to, thank goodness the gravity that we have on Earth is pretty much the same everywhere. It isn't though, but it's pretty much the same everywhere. But weight in the metric system, the kilo, is based on an observable and understandable phenomenon in nature, where if you have 1 cubic meter of something, it weighs 1 kilo. And I think they used water. Something everybody can measure. 1 kilo of water is equal to 1 cubic centimeter. No, 1 cubic meter. No, it's not it. 1 cubic something. Could be a so imagine a cubic meter of water weighs 100 kilos or something like that. Yeah, it would be something like that. As I'm talking to you, I'm figuring it out, remembering it out. So it's a very linear process. Wherein in the inch, where you have 16/16 of an inch equals 1 inch, which is then you've 12 of those, 144/16 equals a foot. I don't know, 12 times 16. 2 times. I'm not even going to do the math this early. But that's the thing. You need to do math to figure out 16ths or eighths of an inch or half inch. You know, there's 24 half inches in a foot. Double that's 48 quarter inches, 84/16. In other words, you got to see how I'm doing the math. Well, there are 10 centimeters in a meter, or 100 centimeters in a meter, and 100 millimeters in a centimeter, and they're just bases of hundreds and bases of tens. It's super easy to do math and metrics. Super easy to do measurements because everything's a function of 10 or a function of 100. That's it. That's all it is. That's why I love the metric system when it comes to wrenches. You know, what size is it? Oh, is that a 9/16? Nah, dude. It's 12 millimeter. Or 10, the elusive 10 millimeter. So we're talking about gauges. And why do we use the word gauges rather than wire thickness? I'll read. The American wire gauge, also known as the Brown and Sharp wire gauge, named after two guys who just decided to name it after themselves, is a logarithmic stepped standardized wire gauge system used since 1857. Well, I figure it's the size of my pinky, so we're going to start there. Predominantly in North America. That's us, United States. For the diameters of round, solid, non-ferrous, electrically conducting wire. Let's break that statement down. Logarithmically stepped standardized wire. So when you double the size of something, it's the next step up. We've used it since 1857. It's freaking old. Probably stupid now. Predominantly in North America, in the United States. For the diameters, remember what a diameter is? From one side of a circle to the other. Radius is from the middle out, diameter is across, circumference goes around. Solid, which means it's not made up of itty bitty little fine hairs, that it's a solid piece of wire. Non-ferrous, not iron, usually copper. Electrically conducting wire. Well, we're making wire. Of course we want it electrically conductive. Oh, I know what they're referencing now. There are other types of wire. Baling wire, hay, also known as hay wire, which is an interesting side topic. You guys ever hear, oh, it's going haywire? Everything's going haywire. That's because haywire, when it's sent to you to wrap hay bales, is sent not in a nice coil. Like, you guys ever seen a seamstress with her sewing kit, and you have those, they're called, oh my brain just passed away on me. So when you get thread, and the thread comes on these small little tumblers, they're round and the thread's wrapped really prettily on this thimble of plastic, used to be wood, and it's wrapped in a really nice, pretty way. When you get hay wire for hay, it was always the crappiest wire that the company could put out, because you're just trying to wrap hay bales. And a lot of times they would break, so you'd have to like wrap the hay bales. And I know at certain points there was even people using a braiding of cloth-like material, not rope, because that would really be tough and strong, but more like a burlap sack kind of a material, cloth material. I'm trying to remember what it is. It's not part of my normal everyday thought process, so I don't remember what the name of it is. But it's frayed, and if you pull it too hard, it breaks. And that was the thing they actually wanted. If you really wanted to wrap a hay bale, you'd wrap it a couple times, but if you tugged on it really hard, it would break, so that it would be easy for farmers to put it in their fields and crack open a hay bale, and the hay would spread out, and they'd be able to give it to their animals to feed. And they would discuss hay bale wires as haywire. And it was all crazy and not very smooth, like a proper rope. And that's where the term haywire came from. It went all haywire, man. It went all frayed and crazy. That's where the birth of that term came from. So look at that. They did specify electrically conducting wire because they didn't want to include the measurements used in baling wire, in fencing wire, and any of that other stuff. Dimensions of the wires are given in ASTM Standard B258. The cross-sectional area of each gauge is an important factor for determining its current carrying ampacity. In other words, how much electricity can it flow? Can it push? ASTM standard, American Standard of something. I don't know what that. Hold on, I'll click on it. See if it brings up. ASTM International Redirect Room is formerly known as the American Society for Testing and Materials. It is an international standards organization, international, even though it's American, that develops and publishes a voluntary consensus of technical standards for a wide range of materials, systems, products, and services. Okay. Organization's headquarters is in West Conshohocken, Pennsylvania, about 5 miles north of Philly. So, increasing a gauge number denotes decreasing wire diameters, which is similar, and why it's so weird, to many other non-metric gauging systems, such as the British Standard Wire Gauge. But unlike the IEC, the International European Standard of Metric Wire Size, used in most parts of the world. In other words, this article actually goes, we get it. We're the last ones to use the old-timey stuff that's kind of stupid. The rest of the world uses metric. But we like what we do so dang much, we're not changing. That's the inference. The gauge system originated in the number of drawing operations used to produce a given gauge of wire. Got it. It's the passes through the pole system that denote it. Look at that. I just remembered the system. All right. So I'm going to read it and then I'm going to describe it. This gauge system originated in the number of drawing operations used to produce a given gauge of wire. Very fine wire, for example, 30 gauge, required more passes through the drawing dies than 0 gauge wire did. Manufacturers of wire formerly had proprietary wire gauge systems. The development of standardized wire gauges rationalized selection of wire for a particular purpose. These the American wire gauge tables are for single, solid, and round conductor. The AWD of stranded wire is determined by the cross-sectional area of the equivalent solid conductor. We can talk about all this. Interestingly enough, they also have, this is a side note, American wire gauge is also commonly used to specify body-piercing jewelry sizes, especially smaller sizes, even when the material is not metallic or conductive. So let's talk about gauges. Why they call them that. So before we talk about it, we need to see how metal is shipped through the United States and how it is formed and how it's used. I worked at a place called American Olympic Manufacturing Group in Agawam, Massachusetts. It's a company that manufactures screws. They did do nails, but right now they've really solidified on screws, specifically roofing screws and drywall screws, wood screws, things that they use over in the carpentry area. Olympic Manufacturing Group is one of the largest suppliers of roofing screws to the commercial and public arena. They're amazing. I had the good fortune of working with them for quite a bit. I was one of the guys who came in, and because of my welding and my mechanical background, I did nights. I was in charge of their maintenance program for the night teams, wherein any and all machines that needed maintenance during downtimes we worked on. So I would get a letter from my boss, the maintenance supervisor, and saying, these are the machines that are down. These are the machines that need to be cleaned. You know, you and your teams are responsible for bringing them back up into working order for the morning. Or, barring that, if you're unable to let the morning team maintenance, which had a lot more individuals in it, aware of what needs to be done. So, in my capacity as a supervisor who maintained these big screw making machines, you begin to realize how screws are made. You understand what's occurring. So one of the things that I found out was OMG receives a regular supply of wire. This wire is electrically conductive. It needs to be, actually. It is ferrous, though, but it still operates on the American gauge system. We get wire in, and it's the thickness of your first finger, or my first finger, maybe your thumb. I have punchy hands. So we get wire, and it comes on a spool. That's what I couldn't figure out before. The little plastic or wooden thing is called a spool. Our spools are 4.5 feet tall, 8 feet in diameter, 4 foot from center to out, so it's 8 feet across. If you stand a spool up, it's taller than you, can roll along the floor. The only way to move these suckers around is by forklift. Some of the time you guys see them on 18 wheelers. They look like these huge, anyways, it doesn't matter. So we get this wire, the thickness of my first finger, your thumb, and this wire is steel. It's a form of steel. It's iron with some chemicals mixed in to give it a very particular property that comes from the foundry this way. And so the foundry is the place where they take all the ingredients of iron ore and these chemicals that they want to add and mix in a super furnace. It's really big, and they pour it out. And as they pour it, there are machines that allow this pouring of hot metal to be what's known as extruded. It's an extrusion. It pulls the metal like a big piece of hose from where you're pouring it. And as it pours, it goes on rollers. I'm going to have to answer this as another. There we go. That was the welding instructor, Matt, checking in to see how I'm doing because he knew I was off yesterday. I took a mental health day. I had to clear my head. I think too much. So I don't even remember what I was talking about before his phone call. I remember we're on American Gauge. Oh, Olympic Manufacturing Group. We would get wire in this thickness. So then we would get the wire in, and then we'd have to bring it over to our sizing dies. And we would pass this gauge wire, and I forget what it was because now I'm thinking welding. And they would take this wire and they would push it through a set of round circular dies, stretching it out, pulling it out. You guys ever take like bubble gum and it's a big wad and you pull it? What happens when you pull it? It gets thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner. Well, you pull too fast and too far, and that gets so thin the bubble gum breaks, right? The same thing happens with wire, but on an industrial scale. So in order for it to be pulled out and brought down to a proper size diameter, they have pulleys and wheels, and a die is nothing more than 10 o'clock. I have a meeting to go to. It can wait. Imagine 2 wheels pressing down on a center thing going through. And those wheels, as they crush the wheel, whatever's in between them down, it gets thin. Whatever's in being pushed down in the middle gets thinner. However many times wire goes back and forth through these compressive wheels dictates the amount of gauge that they're given. So if I pass one wire through the system twice, we'll call it a 2 gauge. That means it's only been reduced just a little bit. 2 gauges. I passed it 2 times. Let's say we pass it through the system 10 times back and forth. Well, then we call it a 10 gauge because it's passed through the system and it's a lot thinner. Well, what happens if you pass it through 30 times? Really thin diameter, small diameter wire, like almost like a human hair, right? But it's copper. It's really thin. That's where we get these different gauges. How many times it passes through the wire squeezer, the wire thinner outer. That's it. That's all it is for today's discussion. And today's magic word is, what should it be? Let's just call it who did Mr. Romer get a call from? Matt. Matt. M-A-T-T. I think his name is Matt Weibel, is the proper pronunciation. But we'll just leave it as Matt. Now you know.